vets craving surrender to the BLM mob. The Mirror has the exclusive that Stephen Lawrence's father has urged one of his son's killers to name the rest of the gang who murdered him. The Times reports that thousands of students are suspected of fraudulently claiming hundreds of millions of pounds from Britain's university loan system. And The Star claims that 1 million Brits wake up the neighbours with their bedtime snoring? Yes, or snorting. Actually, it says snorting. I'd like to know what the difference is. Interesting. We are joined tonight by Christina, Patterson and Albie, Amankona. We're not going to be discussing that story.
Pigs. It means you've got pigs sleeping in your bed.
Yes, very strange headline. We shall delve deeper, but I'm sure we won't be discussing the difference between snorting and snoring. We're going to start with a serious story, and this on the front page of The Observer. Their headline, all families to be worse off by 2030 as poor bear the brunt. This is from some Joseph Rowntree Foundation stats. Albie, take us into this.
It's a very depressing headline, I think, for anyone reading this story that's going to be in The Observer tomorrow. Essentially, it's from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which is quite an important think tank, probably on the centre-left of British politics. But they're really quite damning, actually, probably, on Labour's strategy for where we're going to go in between now and 2030. And they think that living standards are going to fall for everyone. They're also talking about the cuts that the Chancellor may have to implement after the spring statement, which is, of course, upcoming very soon. So it's not painting a very good picture for the UK, but there are some structural problems with our economy that I would probably agree with this analysis on. We look at the levels of productivity that we have, they're very low. Economic growth is very sclerotic. We've got an ageing population and a shrinking labour force, which is pushing up public spending over time. So unless something changes quite radically, yes, living standards will fall, and we're not even talking about the fact that we're having to spend more on defence. So a lot of challenges on the public purse towards the end of the decade.
Yeah, really depressing reading, Christine.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that headline, you think, oh, great, you know, things feel bad now. You know, you do think, you know, the Labour came into power on a promise of change, and I don't think this was a change that people felt they were voting for. But I do actually agree with everything that Albie just said. I think there are structural problems, and the benefit cuts that have been announced, which have understandably gone down extremely badly with an awful lot of people. I mean, that is part of the picture, that we have 1 million young people who normally would be in a workforce and aren't. And we have, post-COVID, many more people who are out of work and not in education or employment, again, among young people, than our European counterparts. So there is something going wrong with our economy. And you know, let's be clear that these are extremely turbulent times. Albie mentioned defence. Given what Donald Trump is doing, you know, 5 minutes ago and 2 minutes ago and 1 minute ago, which obviously changes every 10 seconds, the one thing that's pretty clear is that he cannot be counted on in security terms. And if Europe wants to remain peaceful, apart from Ukraine, and indeed wants to support Ukraine, we are going to have to enormously increase defence budgets, which very, very sadly, will have an enormous effect for other services, because we can't just, you know, Rachel Reeves doesn't have the option. I know plenty of people are suggesting she should do this, but she's put her fiscal rules in for a reason, because the cost of borrowing will, you know, you can't just accommodate that and then that will add enormously to you know, public spending ultimately. So, I mean, their options are very narrow. What is depressing and worrying about this report is that the suggestion is that the poorest are going to pay the highest price. And since the poor generally pay the highest price for everything, that clearly isn't good news.
Yes, as the paper says, blow for PM over living standards pledge, and that obviously would deplete the living standards of the poorest, as you say. Rachel Reeves, obviously the name and the woman of the moment, with the statement coming up this week. We turn to the Sunday Telegraph. and read that she will be taking the axe to the civil service, will order them to save £2 billion a year in a move that unions say could result in tens of thousands of government jobs being axed.
So this is actually a policy that I wholeheartedly agree with, and the economic picture can look very depressing at the moment, and the last story and this story sound quite depressing. But there is a way out of this, and one of the ways out of this is to spend the money that the government does take in tax receipts better. And I think trimming the civil service back to closer to levels that we had before the pandemic is probably a good way to do that. The civil service has ballooned, according to this article, by 100,000 since the pandemic. Now, obviously, we know what those civil servants were doing. They were helping with the administration of all the pandemic policy. They were also helping with the administration of Brexit. Now those two problems are no longer as big a problems as they were in the past. I think it's right that the civil service right-sizes.
Christina, do you agree with that? Because it's not just the civil service, is it? It's other departments being asked to make administrative costs of 50% by 2030.
50%?
15.
Oh, 15%. Well, I do agree with Albie, actually. I think if the civil service increased by 100,000 jobs and the talk is of axing 10,000 jobs, obviously that's awful for the people who are losing their jobs, but that's still 90,000 more civil servants than we had before the pandemic. And I'm afraid there is wastage in the system, and one of the things that's talked about here is procurement. I think a lot of government procurement is very inefficient. Very often when people look into it, they can source things more economically. And I think AI, using technology more wisely, AI is going to change absolutely everything. We're either going to be in tune with this thing and allowing it to support and help us, or we're going to be overtaken by it, and then it's going to be a life-changing, world-changing thing. But we need to harness it now in ways that help us and which do save the taxpayer money. So I do actually support this, and I don't think Rachel Reeves has any choice other than to trim government departments. I think there is inefficiency, but, clearly it has to be done very carefully.
Sound a bit like Elon Musk.
I definitely do not sound like Elon Musk, because I'm not sending in ill-qualified or indeed completely unqualified youngsters who have been unable to get any other job to go in and steal everybody's data and make random firings.
But this is an area that you both think public opinion will be akin to the cuts in the civil service. It's not something...
I think it probably will be. Obviously, if you are a civil servant or are married to a civil servant, you'll feel very differently. And honestly, my heart goes out to anyone who loses their job. I wouldn't actively want anyone to lose their job. But, we are talking about necessity here. And I think, and maybe, out of the number of people who are there, it may well be that quite a few of these can go through a voluntary redundancy. It could well be that they would hit the 10,000 by doing that.
We shall see. We shall see on that. Let's move to the Mirror, and this is an exclusive from the Mirror. They've spoken to the father of Stephen Lawrence, who is now saying to one of the killers of his son that he should name others that were involved in the gang on that fateful night of that terrible murder. Albie.
Yes, David Norris has finally admitted that he was actually at the scene when Stephen Lawrence was murdered back in 1993. I think it's amazing that this story is still making headlines more than 30 years later. It's something which many black families across the country still talk about. We drive past the site of where it happened on the way to my aunt's church, which is down in Kent, and she actually took me to the site that it happened. And it's something that affected the black community, but in fact the entire country so deeply, not just the Mirror, but even there were front pages of the Mail at the time talking about how awful this was. So I think it's good that we haven't forgotten about it. It's absolutely heartbreaking to me that both Baroness Lawrence and Neville Lawrence still don't actually know the names of the people that killed their 18-year-old son in cold blood back in 1993.
There is some hope now that those names will be given up by David Norris, now that he has admitted to being at the scene.
Yeah, I mean, it was really a seminal moment in British history, actually, Stephen Lawrence's murder. I don't think any of us, well, I hope that none of us who were following the news at that time will forget the power of what happened. And it did have long-reaching effects for the police, which was found guilty of institutional racism. It was absolutely horrific what was uncovered in that report, and the links that some of the alleged murderers had to police officers. And I think the agony that I've met Baroness Lawrence, she's an extraordinary woman. The agony that she and Neville Lawrence went through is unimaginable. And I think we should also mention the Mail here, which fought a very strong campaign to get justice for his killers. And, you know, many of us don't support the Mail's politics in all kinds of ways, but that is one way in which they absolutely have fought for justice.
The hope is now that the family can get true justice and further closure on this horrific crime. As you say, over 30 years ago, but still rings very, very deep with many people. We are going to take a break now. Thank you both for the moment. Coming up, the investigation into Britain's energy resilience after Heathrow's power outage. Stay with us for more on that.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. I've witnessed migration across Europe close up.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Seagal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
1 more year!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Christina, Patterson and Albie, Amankona. Let's take a look in this section at the Express front page and their headline, Asylum Crisis Wrecking Our Communities. The Sunday Express front page looking at this story. But Albie, what do you make of the headline in itself? I mean, do you think it's scaremongering? Does the article present the evidence to back this headline up?
It's a pretty sensationalist headline, and it's certainly going to get people's eyeballs and their tongues wagging. And it is an issue that a lot of people in this country are very concerned about. Labour today has just announced that it's looking at sending Channel migrants to Albania as a deterrent. It sounds quite similar to the Conservatives' idea to send them to Rwanda, but perhaps Albania is a more palatable country. So the point is, both the major parties understand that this is an issue that bothers the public very much, and it's actually driving up support for parties that are further on the right of the Conservatives, such as the Reform Party. So it's absolutely right that the major parties come up with a solution to this. Now, with regards to this article, these Channel migrants are having a significant impact on some communities. If we just look at some of the figures that they're talking about here, 5,000 people have arrived since the beginning of this year, 24% than I believe the same period as last year. A number of asylum seekers have been in expensive hotel accommodation. Businesses, these hotel businesses are quite often the centre of some communities, and these communities have completely changed as a result of these hotels being filled with Channel migrants. Now, that is not to say all of them are illegal migrants that are coming here economically, but the idea that this isn't having an impact on communities is false, and there's a reason why all the major parties want to tackle it.
But, Christina, is there evidence for this, the sub-headline, Councils fear outbreaks of violence on Britain's streets?
Well, if there is, it must be hidden on page 643 or something, because there is absolutely no sign of that evidence here. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, given everything that's happening in the world at the moment, and given that we are in a really, really serious situation in terms of European security because of Donald Trump's behaviour, and the fact that there is an actual war and that Putin is threatening to extend that war, that the front page of any newspaper at the moment is something as misleading as this, that asylum crisis wrecking our communities. Of course, there is an issue with immigration. The bigger issue is the fact that the Tories brought us Brexit largely, or a very significant feature of that was people's feelings about immigration, the feeling that there was too much immigration in this country. And then what the Tories did was brought us net immigration of nearly 1 million. So record numbers of immigration. And then we're focusing here on 38,000 people who've come over here on small boats, which is not to say that in the communities they're put in, they might have an impact. You know, there are towns which have not been very well prepared, which take an unusually high, sort of probably a higher proportion than other towns. I'm not saying that has
So there is
no
evidence
impact.
for the headline, then?
There's evidence that there is absolutely no evidence of outbreaks of violence on Britain's streets. There is evidence that it causes unease. But I think what causes much greater unease is having people come in, like nearly 1 million, came in, I think it was 2023, that causes much more, that has a much bigger burden on society than this does. And I think it's really irresponsible to fuel racist sentiment in the way that this front page has done.
OK, we're just going to move on just because of time. We've only got about a minute, Albie, to talk about the lessons apparently forgotten after COVID. This is the Observer front page.
Yes, on the front page of the Observer. Not a very nice front page on the Observer. First telling us we're all going to be poorer by 2030, and second telling us that we've forgotten the lessons of COVID. This report also says that they think if there was another pandemic, because not enough progress has been made, actually it would probably be worse than the one before because we've not learnt enough lessons. So not easy reading on the front of the Observer.
No, indeed not.
So it's all looking quite gloomy.
Albie and Christina, thank you very much for taking us through the papers this hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, Heathrow is now fully operational after a power outage, but airlines warn passengers still face delays.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story